Thank you so much, Volker. I mean, honestly, the honor is mine. I heard really good things. I'm happy to be here now. I also will make sure to check into Plamadiso talks in the future. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know making time for these webinars is difficult, so I highly appreciate it. I mean, Volker already said all the things that I need to say for the introduction, so I just read the title again. So what I'm going to present today is actually the last chapter of my dissertation, Cultivating Match Quality in Platform Ecosystems, Balancing Openness and Curation. And I would like to start the talk with a short thought experiment. So imagine you're an ecosystem preservationist, okay, tasked with caretaking one of the following ecosystems: the rainforest, an orchard, a river, or a lagoon. While this might sound a bit abstract at now, I think it will become very clear during the talk what I mean by this. But I think all of you will agree that the task of the caretaking of these ecosystems should be vastly different. And some of them might seem a bit more daunting than others, okay? And also to link it to the real world and the importance of what I'm going to talk about here today, I have a couple of headlines here that highlight how difficult it can be to effectively curate or caretake a platform ecosystem. So the Android authority says, Play Store now warns you that the app you're looking at might suck. Well, on the Google Play Store, there's so many apps that it's not super surprising that some of them might be of very low quality. So this might happen. Here we have a Bloomberg article on Airbnb. Airbnb is spending millions of dollars to make nightmares go away. Well, I can imagine that can come from both ends. Yeah, there can be very creepy hosts or landlords on Airbnb, or like guests that then trash the apartment. So this can also go both ways. Forbes here has an article on Steam's uneven and opaque approach to curation hurts indie developers. Also something we do not like to see. And Dicebreaker has something on Kickstarter where it says almost a fifth of money raised by Kickstarter projects goes to scam campaigns, reports alleges. So all of them are just supposed to highlight the importance of what I'm about to talk about, which is like the match quality in these platforms ecosystems. So since this is a theory piece, we will have to cover some ground in defining the most important constructs. Okay, so bear with me. We will start with platform ecosystems, even though I think all of us have a good idea of what this is. But I'm just for completion's sake, I'm talking about them now, okay? So the entity in charge of an ecosystem, we call them here platform orchestrator. You can call them hub firm, platform sponsor, or any of these. But I think for what we're about to say, orchestrator fits the best, who facilitates interactions between a supply side and a demand side, which are usually connected via an indirect network effect. Okay, and these indirect network effects occur when the platform becomes more valuable, the more high quality and diverse complements are on the platform. So these are the products, the supply side, the complementary produces and offers on the platform, the more attractive. And so the more of them are there, the more attractive the platform becomes to the end user and vice versa, okay? I do not give you an example because I think you all know what it is. And then it's also well known that orchestrators need to fulfill at least two major governance tasks within these platform ecosystems for a driving ecosystem. The first one is openness, which means deciding who and how complementers can join the platform. And the second one is curation, which is essentially actively facilitating the interactions between the two sides of the market. This is all we know from the literature that's important for that today. So a rarely discussed but super important construct that's even named in the title that lies at the core of this paper is match quality, okay? So we define match quality or platform match quality as the extent to which a platform consistently facilitates interactions that closely match users' diverse preferences and needs, fostering valuable exchanges. And if this happens regularly for the majority of users over time, it means that the platform ecosystems achieves high match quality at the aggregate level. That's the goal for a healthy and driving ecosystem. And now you might ask, well, how is this conceptually different from network effects? Well, this is one of the contributions we're claiming, okay? So we know, or we understand from the literature that network effects are a force that attract users to join the platform ecosystem and therefore increase the chance of any interaction to take place ex ante. Whereas we see match quality as a sticky force that reflects the value of an interaction and therefore increases the likelihood of an additional interaction taking place ex post. That's the main difference we're proposing here. One last construct before I dive into the tangent, okay, that's important that we're all on the same page. It's also, in my opinion, a very important and novel or under-discussed construct that shapes our theory here called complement type. So complements can be of two types in platform ecosystems. They can be either stock or flow complements. So let's start with stock complements. those are the complements that remain on the platform indefinitely. Think of apps, Amazon products, video games on Steam, artisan stuff that's posted on Etsy, all the things that just stay on the platform indefinitely. So stock complements constantly increase in the number of interaction options and strengthen, therefore, network effects. But they might also lead to congestion and competitive crowding, which increases search costs and lowers match quality without any intervention of the orchestrator. The other one is the less well-known one called flow complements. They are comparable to perishable goods as they only remain on the platform for a limited amount of time. There can be multiple reasons for this. Either the use is limited, there's a time window for it, or it's depleted with use. Think of tickets offered on Ticketmaster. Kickstarter project is an example for when the time is limited, or there is no way for simultaneous use. Think of a night on Airbnb. On Airbnb, you do not actually book a property, you book a night. And this night can only be booked by one person. So this is also a definition for us for flow, even though I understand that there the nuances kick in and it becomes a bit more complicated. But nevertheless, I foreground this here. Importantly, complement type changes the matching problem and the curation burden. That should be clear from the definitions I just gave. So this is the ground we need to cover in terms of theoretical constructs. These are most of the most important theoretical constructs we're about to mention today. So let's go into the tension, okay? What are we trying to solve here? The platform governance literature usually emphasizes non-pricing mechanisms, such as platform openness or the orchestration, and their effect on value creation and value capture. And while we know a lot about how these mechanisms influence indirect network effects, which are important for overcoming the chicken and egg problem and platform growth, we know much less about governance that can help sustain valuable interactions over time, and therefore drives engagement. So to sustain these interactions over time, platform orchestrators face an openness curation trade-off or even trade-offs. So on more open platforms, complement and user numbers grow rapidly, which to a degree is necessary for interactions to take place in the first place. But at the same time, user preferences are more heterogeneous in this context, increasing the curation burden on the platform sponsor. On more closed platforms, users will be more homogeneous. Why? Well, if you gatekeep the complementers who can join the platform, the end users will know about this and will therefore be aligned in their preferences when joining the platform thereafter. But growth might be stifled here, also complicating matching if there's a lack of available options and choice for end users. To complicate the whole dynamic, and you see we try to make a bit of an, not all-encompassing, but complete theoretical argument here. These tensions also differ across complement type and change dynamically with platform growth. And all of this has important implications for how to adequately manage platform ecosystems for match quality. Therefore, we ask, how do platform orchestrators balance openness and curation to maintain high-value interactions over time or as they grow? And how do complement type and platform evolution shape that balance over time? I know that was a mouthful, but that's the intro, okay? The stage has been set. I'm usually not a big fan of talking a lot about the literature in those type of presentations, but since this is a theory piece, we need to mention it a bit at least. So I try to make this short, okay? So as already mentioned in the introduction, the platform governance literature is mainly about openness and curation and looking at this mainly in isolation as well, okay? So openness and curation have mainly been looked at in isolation, even though it should be clear that at least one heavily affects the other. Openness has a clear effect on how the platform should be curated, at least in my reading of the literature. So then there's also a few papers that cover platform evolution and thereby the need to adjust these governance changes over time. So I would suggest, sorry, why is this? Okay, no, you see everything, good. So I would suggest we now briefly talk about what platform openness literature has been covered and what the platform curation literature has been covered, and then we can get into the meat of it with like the theory development and so on. So let's do this. So platform openness, pretty straightforward, refers to the degree to which complementers are allowed to join and interact on the platform. And even though platform openness is usually considered a continuous measure for the purpose of theoretical clarity today, I might often say something like an open platform and a closed platform simply because it makes things easier, okay? So bear with me when this happens. But the actual correct way of stating these things is a more closed or a more open platform. So open platforms in general have fewer entry restrictions, leading to greater variety and more users on both sides. However, this simultaneously increases heterogeneity in preferences and therefore also in search cost. These preferences appear, so some of you might say, well, not always. I would argue they always appear simply because we can differentiate between early and late adopters, and we have some form of heterogeneity already going on at the bare minimum. But there are more dimensions than this that I will mention a bit later. eBay, I have as an example here. And as a comparison, a more closed platform, Etsy, they're obviously more restricted, which leads usually to a more homogeneous set of offerings because there's being gatekeeping at the entry point to the platform on the supply side, which then makes matching easier at first. However, at the same time, these closed platforms might struggle to scale efficiently. So there's a different creation problem happening when they are closed. Okay, then moving to platform curation, which we identified as the other important pillar we need to discuss when talking about match quality in the systems. The literature separates this, and so do we, into manual and algorithmic curation. So let's start with manual one. So manual curation involves human editorial selection, usually highlighting best-in-class offers, and is more effective for smaller, more homogeneous groups, since that's all a human editor can handle. We are boundedly rational. We cannot screen 1 million offers effectively as a human. So that's why it's a bit more limited when it comes to scale. Importantly, also, manual curation is much better suited to signal a platform's identity and nudge ecosystem participants' behavior. This is the case because manual curation is a one-to-many matching. So if there's something highlighted manually in the platform ecosystem, something like editor's choice on the App Store, every single user will see this label as the editor's choice. And this also reflects some form of behavioral recommendations on part of the platform orchestrator to adjust the behavior of complementers in a certain way. So on the App Store, for example, it's quite common that those apps that incorporate a new feature with a new iOS version are much more likely to receive an editor's choice badge, okay, and being curated in that way. Good. The other side of the coin is algorithmic curation, which is data-driven and automated, and therefore better suited for large and heterogeneous markets in which much user-level information is already available. Platform sponsors can use this type of curation to broaden and deepen user explorations of offerings. However, too much reliance on this algorithmic curation can lead to alienating customers who feel that they are always swayed or always nudged towards the same narrow set of content. I think we all know the experience of feeling like we're in this echo chamber and we're not really having an opportunity to get out of it anymore. Only being suggested, I don't know, criminal stuff on Netflix, for example. So effective curation overall can lower search costs for consumers, steer end users' attention to viable complements, and enhance the ecosystem's value creation at large, and therefore the health of it as well. It can also increase the number of interactions on the platforms, as well as their quality as perceived by end users. So by recommending different complements to end users, curation can help reduce competitive crowding. And all of this will be important when we now finally go into the theory development. So this is really the heart of the paper that I want to talk to you about today. Usually I ask for questions at this point, but it's nice to do this after in a webinar, I guess. So for our theory purposes, we assume a platform orchestrator to facilitate the matching within their respective ecosystems. Without adequate matching, users would incur much higher search costs, which increase with the heterogeneity of the preferences on both sides. And I would like to briefly mention again that heterogeneity has a vertical and a horizontal dimension to it. What does this mean? Well, vertically differentiated users different in their preferences for quality and price. That's vertical. Whereas horizontally differentiated users differ in their taste for breadth and depth of offering. Usually that's on the category level, what we're thinking about here. So imagine you're browsing Amazon without any reviews, without any review scores, without any rankings, or maybe without even any pictures. Well, more or less impossible to do so. So curation clearly is needed to facilitate better matches and avoid low quality pairings, which would cause users then, as we argue, to leave the ecosystem. And the right curation, some of you might have realized by now, depends on this nice 2x2 that we built here, on the openness of the platform and the complement type. Okay, so this leads to the first big thing that we are developing in this paper, which is a typology of platform ecosystem ideal types, I would call it. So platform openness and complement type lead to this 2x2. And in the first configuration, which is an open platform ecosystem that hosts stock complements, many heterogeneous users will face a variety of persistent complements on the platform. As an example, I give Amazon, but I mentioned a couple of others. Steam is another one. And we dubbed this, so there's a lot of diversity in these platforms, so we dubbed this one a rainforest. Okay, this is a rainforest platform ecosystem. If the complementer side is closed and we have stock complements, a more homogeneous user base faces persistent gate-selected complements. So it's a bit less diverse, and we dubbed this, for this reason, an orchard. Okay. Now we move to flow complements, where we are going into aquatic ecosystems. So if the complementer side, in the case of an open platform, with flow complements, we have heterogeneous end users facing fleeting complements. So they're coming in and out and flowing through, which reminded us of a river. And finally, in the case that the platform is closed but contains flow complements, we have the most homogeneous users and the least available options at any point in time, because you have gate selection and outflow, which then reminded us of a lagoon. Okay, so so this paper is targeting AMR, by the way, so it's quite common to have these a bit more picturesque, metaphoric kind of language. I have to say, though, I think we hit it quite well. I think it's not just a nice description of how these ecosystems look like. It's quite fitting also the theoretical language, linking us to like these stock ones being forest type or plant-based ecosystems, and then the flow ones are being aquatic. I think it fits quite nicely. So in the paper, and also here, we do not really want to make any normative claims too much. So this slide is purely serves for our discussion later on what each ecosystem means for the market and its curation, okay? But I try to be very careful in taking a normative stance here. It's much more descriptive than that. So rainforests have high transaction volume and strong network effects. Obviously, an underlying assumption is here that they successfully populated both sides of the market. They overcame the chicken and egg problem. They're running. Okay, I do not say anything about the nascent stages of the ecosystem. I do not theorize about whether and when they die. By the way, it's all about like they're on the run already. But they also face a high risk of mismatches due to the heterogeneity and the choice overload customers potentially face, because there's just so much stuff on these platforms. So in this case, algorithmic curation can be used based on the abundance of data that should be available, while manual curation can help to highlight best-in-class offers, especially to give high quality, but newer complements a chance to be discovered. So one of the main issues I see in these rainforest platforms is that you would like, as a new entrant, to get your really high quality complement to the market, but any algorithmic recommendation would steer users towards these high class superstar complements that have already been established in the market. And there then manual curation could come in, where an editorial board says, okay, this is a very good, novel complement, deserves the attention of users that are usually would have been swayed towards these other high class, high quality complements that have been established in there already. In an ORCARD, there's a lower probability of mismatches simply because there's closer alignment with the gate selection criteria and the user preferences. So here, manual curation can help throughout the life cycle, while algorithmic curation becomes much more effective later on, when the necessary number of user interactions has occurred over time. A river requires highly agile algorithmic curation because there are many fleeting complements that need to be discovered by the right user at the right time. In these ecosystems, I would argue manual curation plays a subordinary role, or less important there. And in a lagoon, most likely reason for lower match quality in lagoons is that users might miss potentially high-value interaction partners, simply because there are only so few and they drop in and out. As such, manual curation here can be used again to highlight these high-quality but soon expiring offers, while algorithmic curation becomes relevant only after sufficient interactions have occurred later on. So in how I've talked about this, you might have realized that I'm very keen on taking an evolutionary perspective on these things. The typology in itself is kind of static, but I already adjusted the language to drive into this most interesting part of the paper, I'd argue. So I start with acknowledging that ecosystems evolve. And in this slide, I outlined the dynamics that hold for all of these ecosystem ideal types I've just presented. And then it gets much more nuanced later on. But what holds for all of these platforms is, well, they grow. What does this mean? More complements, more end users enter the ecosystem. That also means, by definition, at the bare minimum, there's a difference between later and early adopters. So offerings and user preferences become more heterogeneous as they grow. That also means search is getting harder. Users will struggle more to identify suitable matches within a much more crowded, much more diverse market. And that entails, well, the curation burden rises. So the platform must play a larger role in guiding high-value interactions. That leads to a really nice outcome that we also claim as a bit of a contribution. Its growth alone does not preserve match quality. Curation becomes increasingly central as the platform evolves, which leads to our first baseline proposition we're having here that says, as platforms grow, curation becomes increasingly important for maintaining high-value interactions. Why are we calling this high-value interactions here? Well, we were writing this paper with an eye on dropping as many theoretical constructs as possible. I like match quality as a construct, but it's good to see that we can actually circumwrite this in very understandable terms, also for people who have never heard of match quality. They will understand, okay, maintaining high-value interactions, that it's quite clear what it means. Good, baseline. Let's move on. So now we look at the evolutionary dynamics between manual and algorithmic curation. So as platforms grow, the number of possible complement users matches expands sharply. That's what we said, making it harder for human editors to identify good matches, simply because there's too many. There's literally bounded rationality kicks in. We cannot have a look at all of them anymore. At the same time, more interactions also generate this data, which then can be used to improve algorithmic recommendations. So we really have these countervailing forces that move in the same direction. Manual curation becomes less well suited to establish or maintain high match quality, whereas algorithmic recommendation becomes more valuable over time, leading to our second proposition. As platforms grow, curation shifts from predominantly manual to predominantly algorithmic recommendations to maintain high value interactions. An example I can give here is Spotify. When Spotify launched, most of these curated playlists, Rap Caviar, for example, was actually manually curated, and every single user would listen to the same Rap Caviar playlist. 1 or 2 years ago, Spotify changed this curation effort to be an algorithmic one. Now Rap Caviar is actually adjusted to my preferences. Whether I like hip hop or not, Rap Caviar will be different for any specific user, okay? Illustrating the shift. Good. Next one, we talk about evolutionary curation in open versus closed. Okay, we're going through the 2x2 and looking at all of the different ways we can pull this apart in an evolutionary perspective. So on open platforms, just as a reminder, those are the rainforests and the rivers. They attract on average more complements, more users, and also lead to more diversity on both sides, making the matching task more complex. Okay, and for this reason, again, manual curation less effective. Open platforms also generate more data. So again, this is very well aligned with the evolutionary dynamic in terms of growth, where open is more growth. So the forces work in the exact same way here. So P3 and P2 are interrelated, just that it's not growth, but openness here. So to maintain high value interactions as platform grow, open platform ecosystems make the shift from predominantly manual to predominantly algorithmic recommendations faster than in closed platform ecosystems. Now we do stock versus flow. Okay, so in stock platforms, as a reminder, those are the rainforests and the orchards, complements remain available over time. So all the successful offerings can dominate the attention and make it harder for any new complement to be discovered. What could we use? Well, manual curation therefore remains valuable for surfacing new complements and giving them a fair fighting chance against these established superstars in there. The algorithm is really bad in swaying away from the already established stuff. So this is where you need manual curation to provide this fighting chance. And there's a second reason platform ecosystem orchestrators might find manual curation here very beneficial. as it also helps the platform to rebalance the demand, reduces the excessive concentration around these superstar complements, and preserving bargaining power. So we know there's a lot of scrutiny around the Epic case with the iOS App Store, and there are other things. Spotify has launched this fair play initiative. So the platform sponsor, from the platform orchestrator's perspective or the ecosystem orchestrator's perspective, using this manual curation to split demand evenly has the benefits that you remain with larger bargaining power vis-a-vis these superstar or blockbuster complements. So our P4 reads, to maintain high-value interactions as platforms grow, the shift from predominantly manual to predominantly algorithmic recommendations is less pronounced in stock platforms than in flow platforms. So we have a really cool figure, in my opinion, that neatly summarizes all of our propositions that I just showed you. Joost came up with this. He's really genius when it comes to data visualization. So I walk you through this. It looks like not a lot, but it actually is. So the figure maps the relative importance of our two types of curation, manual versus algorithmic, for each of our 4 platform ecosystem ideal types: rainforest, orchards, rivers, and lagoons, across 2 growth stages. So we just assume early stage and later stage. Okay. The sum of both dimensions reflects the overall importance of curation for maintaining high-value interactions within these platform ecosystems. So for that reason, the figure illustrates that first, for all platform ecosystem types, the sum of manual and algorithmic recommendations increases from the early to late growth stage, which is our proposition 1. Okay, curation becomes more important. For all platform ecosystem types, the relative importance of manual versus algorithmic recommendations shifts towards algorithmic recommendations. We move further to the right. From early to late growth stage, which is aligned with proposition 2 we had. And then third, the shift to algorithmic recommendations from early to late growth stage, which is the slope, is steepest for rivers and flattest for orchards, which is aligned with propositions 3 and 4. And finally, the sum of manual and algorithmic recommendations across both stages is largest for rainforest and smallest for lagoons, reflecting the cumulative implications of our propositions in the aggregate. Okay, this is everything I just mentioned you is actually within this one graph that we also explicitly explain in a paragraph in the paper. We're not fully done yet, because these were all the evolutionary dynamics with regards to the curation mechanism. But to make this all-encompassing, or all-encompassing is a strong word, but complete in the sense of all the pieces we lay out, we also need to think about, well, platform ecosystem orchestrators have the option to increase or decrease their openness. So we're laying it out as a function of complement type again, the efficiency of closing down or opening up the platform. So again, in stock platforms, complements accumulate over time. So also low quality entries just stick there and lead to congestion. Tightening entry requirements usually leads to better match quality on the aggregate. Okay, if you have gate selection, you select on quality, for example, it's much more likely that a random draw from a user for a complement leads to a higher quality match. So tightening here helps by filtering out the weak complements before they remain in the systems. And stock platforms can absorb the stricter entry more easily because the complement pool already benefits from accumulation and strong network effects over time. So the logic here is shutting down leads to higher match quality, and especially open platform stock platforms can make use of this. So reducing openness at platforms growth yields greater improvements in match quality for stock platform ecosystems than for flow platform ecosystems. Now let's switch it around. In general, opening up is a problem for match quality, but better for getting the network effect going and overcoming the chicken and egg problem. So we now take the perspective of flow platforms here, because they depend on a steady supply of time-limited complements to meet users' time-sensitive demand. Opening them up can strengthen the network effect and the inflow. And this is taking care of this matching challenge there. Because complements expire here, also low-quality entries will exit again. So congestion is a bit less of a problem. So we need to adjust the language accordingly. Increasing openness at the platform as the platform grows, causes smaller losses in match quality for flow platform ecosystems than for stock platform ecosystems. Okay, it's the complete reversal of the other one. Okay, I think I have 5 more minutes. That will be enough because we're at the discussion and the conclusion. So we're really making, surprise, 3 theoretical contributions. I always love if someone says 3 theoretical contributions because it's always 3. I usually try to say 2, but it's really 3 this time. So for the network effects literature, we distinguish network size from interaction value, okay, by showing that more users and complements do not automatically lead to better interactions. Match quality, in turn, depends on how platforms govern openness and curation. We also contribute to the platform governance literature by showing that openness and curation are interdependent governance mechanisms, okay, and should not be looked at in isolation. And that different ecosystem types create distinct matching problems and curation needs. So these ideal types hopefully are helpful further down the line for this literature. And then also to platform evolution and algorithmic curation literature, because we explain how curation evolves as platforms grow, showing when manual versus algorithmic recommendations become more important and how this depends on openness and complement type. A couple of limitations that I also will mention briefly. So our theory only applies to ecosystems where end users initiate the search and the interaction, and not to any platform where the matching is completely centralized. So Uber is not part of what we're looking at, because Uber homogeneous offers, the matching is totally centralized. There's really not much about user preferences, alignment, and so on. We also focus purely on value creation, which is a really romantic lens to take, because there are also cases in which platforms can primarily pursue value capture, and information asymmetries or reduced transparency is actually beneficial for the value capture dynamic. That's also something we neglect here. Last but not least, we treat stock and flow complements as largely fixed design choice at the nascent stages of the ecosystem, whereas there are also now many cases, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, where initial stock platforms now also have some form of flow complements hosting there, and that deems future research, okay? Like, this is interesting having these hybrid models with regards to complement design. We have a couple of managerial implications, but you can read the headlines yourself, and I think I close it here, and thank you so much.